Brain rot is real. Brain rot. In 2024, those two words were named as Oxford English Dictionary's Word of the Year. Not AI, not election, not anything you'd expect. Brain rot. The most published reference language on earth needed a new word for what was happening to its readers, to you. Forget the politics, forget the celebrity it gets used about. Read the definition again. Deterioration of your mental state. Oxford does not name the word of the year casually. There has to be enough cultural weight behind a phrase that the entire English-speaking world is reaching out for it. A whole generation has been losing something invisible, fast enough that we needed a name for it. I'm Suraj. I work at the intersection of neuroscience, psychology, and ancient philosophy. And what's wild is 3,000 years before Oxford printed definition for brain rot, ancient wisdom said that there is a kind of pleasure that only feels like pleasure because you've forgotten what real pleasure actually feels like. Stanford psychiatrist Dr. Anna Lembke runs the addiction medicine department at one of the best research hospitals on earth. In 2021, she published a book called Dopamine Nation that mapped in clinical detail what happens to your reward system when you chase quick hits. Her core founding sounds simple, and it changes everything once you see it. Pleasure and pain run on one circuit. The cheaper the high, the steeper the cost. Every time you indulge yourself in a low-effort pleasure, your brain compensates by tilting that balance towards pain. You didn't just lose the high, you inherit a low you didn't earn. That single mechanism explains addiction, doom scrolling, late-night shopping, and most of the things you do that you wish you didn't. By the end of this video, you'll have a way to look at any temptation, any habit, any 60-minute window of your day, and instantly see which way it's bending you, whether it's building you or burying you. We are calling it pleasure physics. Let's go. Forget theory for a second. Picture your evening. You finish work at 6, maybe 7. Your shoulders are a brick. Your laptop is still warm. You have, let's say, 60 minutes to feed yourself or get back to whatever the next thing is. You have two doors. Door A, you sit on the couch, you open Instagram or Facebook, and you scroll. Doom scroll. It's soft, easy. You earned this, right? Because you were working hard today. Door B, you put on your shoes, you drive to the gym. The first 5 minutes are awful. Your back is tight. The music's not loud enough. Your form is off because you're under-recovered. 10 minutes in, ask which one feels better. The answer is obvious, door A. Every cell in your body is on door A's side, but that's the wrong question. The question is, which one is getting better? Door A starts at a 7 and ends at a 3. When you start scrolling, you feel okay. Then after a while, you feel a little less okay. Then you feel a little numb. Eventually, you feel a little behind. You scroll one more reel to escape that numbness, and you are at a 2. Door B, on the other hand, starts at a 2. By minute 30, your blood is moving. By minute 50, your spine is awake. You walk out at a 6, and by the time you have eaten and showered, you're at an 8. Tomorrow, you start at a higher energy than yesterday. That's pleasure physics. Same hour, same person, opposite vector. One pleasure starts sweet and ends bitter. The other starts bitter and ends sweet. Pick whichever one 1,000 times in a row and you become a different person. That's transformation in a positive or a not so positive way. In Gita, Krishna lays out 3 kinds of pleasure. Most teachers stop there. I think there's a 4th, and the 4th is where the real game is. Let me walk you through all of them. First pleasure, sattvic heart, poison and nectar. This is the one everyone's heard about. Disciplined cold showers, heavy compound lifts, the hard conversation you've been avoiding, the deep work session at 6 a.m. before anyone else is awake. Krishna describes it as poison at the start, nectar at the end. Every person whose life looks like it was built on purpose mostly lives here. Athletes, founders, surgeons, anyone whose work compounds. The first 30 days hurt. The next 30 hurt slightly less. By the end of the year, you couldn't remember the version of you that didn't do this thing. This is also the loudest category in the modern self-help. And it's not wrong, but it's slightly incomplete. The second pleasure, rajasic pleasure, nectar and poison. Now this is the one we secretly know, but don't want to name. Dessert at 11 p.m. The fight you win that costs you the friendship. The text you fired off at 2 a.m. the last drink that you didn't actually need. The Amazon order at 1 a.m. that arrives feeling like someone else bought it. Sweet, then bitter. Lembke's pleasure-pain balance is exactly this. The reward arrives, your brain locks the dopamine spike, and then the seesaw tips. You feel worse than before, even by a little, so you reach for the next hit to compensate. Multiply that loop across years, and you have a portfolio of habits you don't recognize yourself inside. The third pleasure, tamasic. Poison and poison. Now we're at the dangerous one. The one Oxford named as brain rot. Krishna describes a pleasure that is poison at the start and poison at the end. It only feels like pleasure because you have lost contact with what real pleasure actually feels like. This is the 4-hour scroll session that doesn't even feel good while it's happening. The relationship that you're not in, but you can't leave either. The job that drains you on a Sunday and bores you on a Monday. There's no nectar phase anywhere. This is when your mind rebrands numbness as comfort. So if you've ever caught yourself at minute 90 of a scroll session, eyes glazed, thumb still moving, no idea what you've watched, no plan to stop, that's not rodsick anymore. That's tamasic. That's brain rot in real time. The fourth pleasure, sattvic whole. Pleasure, then elixir. The Gita does point at it, but doesn't put a flag in the ground. So I'm going to. There's a category of pleasure that isn't poison anywhere. It's pleasure all the way through, and it leaves you better afterward. I didn't see this category for years. I almost had to lose it to see it. Let me explain you what I mean. In 2020, I was living in Melbourne when the city went into one of the strictest lockdowns on the planet. Almost 2/3 of the year eventually. 5 kilometers. That was the radius you were legally allowed to move in. 2 hours outside per day. That was your entire allotment. 2 hours within the 5K. For months, that was the world for millions of people. And for those 2 hours, with whoever you can legally be in a park with, I started noticing something I've walked past for decades. A walk in a park is not a small thing. Time outside is not a small thing. A meal at a table with someone who actually knows you is not a small thing. They might have felt small because they were free. The minute these small things got rare, the volume came up. You could feel them for what they actually were. Privileges with massive downstream effects, dressed up as ordinary days. When the city opened, I came back to my old habits and asked the question I'd never thought to ask before. Why was I not protecting these? Why was I scrolling instead of walking? Why was I texting instead of being in the same room with someone? The answer is that I'd misclassified them. They weren't poison the nectar, they were pleasures all the way through. They just wore enough inertia at the front that I'd been skipping them for cheaper hits. The science backs up what the lockdown forced me to see. There's a 2015 study by Dr. Gregory Bratman at Stanford, published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Science. People who walked for 90 minutes in nature versus people who walked for 90 minutes in an urban environment showed measurable reduction in activity in the prefrontal cortex. That's the part of your brain that runs negative self-rumination, the looping, knowing, I should have, I shouldn't have voice in your head. A nature walk doesn't just feel good. It quiets the part of your brain that's been making you miserable. One walk, measurable change. That's not poison turning to nectar, that's pleasure. That is also medicine. That's the fourth kind of pleasure. So here's the upgraded map. Sattvic hard, which starts at poison, then turns into nectar. Sattvic whole, which starts at pleasure and then turns into elixir. Rodsic, which is nectar, then poison. The trap that feels like a reward, and then finally you have tamasic, poison, then poison. The pleasure that isn't pleasure anymore. Look at your last week. Add up the hours. If you're like most of the people, 90% came from the bottom two boxes. The middle of your life is being shaped by the bottom of the menu. Now let's talk about the ripple effect. Every pleasure has two ripples, a vertical one and a horizontal one. The vertical ripple is the next 24 hours. The horizontal ripple is the next 10 years. Let's run a gym example through both. Vertical ripple. You worked out. Your tiredness is clean now, not scattered. You eat actual food because your hunger is real. Your sleep is deeper because your body is asking for repair, not for distraction. You wake up the next morning and your prefrontal cortex is online. That's 24 hours from one workout. A dozen tiny effects, each one stacking. Horizontal ripple. Multiply that vertical ripple day by 1,000. 5 years from now, you have a body that doesn't break, a sleep schedule that runs itself, an identity that says, I'm someone who shows up. There's research on this too. Dr. Carl Kottman's work. going back to the early 2000s, map how exercise increases something called BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor. It's literally fertilizer for new neural connections. Your brain is physically smarter in a year of consistent movement than it is now. You weren't just doing reps, you were growing brain tissue. Now run the same exercise on the scroll, vertical ripple, 90 minutes of doom scrolling. Your dopamine is depleted, your attention is shredded, the book you tried to read at 9 p.m. doesn't land, and so you doom scroll again. You sleep with a high arousal nervous system. You wake up tired. You reach for caffeine. Horizontal ripple, run that day 1,000 times. In 2024, social psychologist Jonathan Haidt published The Anxious Generation. It became one of the most discussed books of the year. His thesis, supported by a wall of citations, is that the smartphone-based childhood has been associated with measurable damage to the mental health of an entire generation. Anxiety, depression, sleep disruption, attention collapse. He frames it as a phase change in human development. We, as a society, has rewired the developmental environment of children inside 15 years, and the data is now coming back. Krishna names 3 doors to self-destruction: lust, anger, greed. He doesn't call them sins, he calls them doors. Walk through one, and the others open. The reel you watched on Instagram led to the comparison. The comparison led to the spending led to the resentment, and that resentment led to the snap at the person who didn't deserve it. Now the deepest layer, the one I want to tell you because it's the reason that you're watching this video at all. Almost a couple of months ago, I was sitting in my backyard here in Melbourne, late evening, and by any external quantitative measure, life was good. I acknowledge that I'm privileged in ways that I don't take for granted. The lights were on, the work was steady, the people in my life were people I loved, but there was something underneath the okay, something keeping me up at night without giving me a reason. It wasn't depression, it wasn't burnout, it was more like a blockade. Years of ideas have been compounding within my head with no outlet. By that time, I've been reading books, I've been building frameworks, I've been having conversations that wouldn't leave me alone. They kept arriving and they had nowhere to go. I'd lie in my bed at 2 a.m. with another brand new thought that I couldn't put anywhere, and the silence in my head was getting loud. Krishna says it like this: the joy that comes from the outside, from the senses meeting the world, has a beginning and an end. It is real, but it is temporary, rented. However, the joy that comes from within, when the mind is quiet and the self is aligned, has no beginning and no end. It is not rented, it is yours. The joy I had was real, but almost all of it was rented. Temporary, hard-earned, but external. Money, career, even the relationships, beautiful as they were, depended on the external world cooperating. I had built an entire life of rented joys, and I had built no internal channel for the kind that comes from putting something out of you into the world. So I made a decision in that backyard that genuinely scared me. I started this channel, and the primary motivation was not to grow an audience, not to get monetized, but to open the channel, to let the ideas flow through me instead of pile up in my brain, to process those ideas by putting them out, and to make room inside my own head for the new things to land. The video you're watching right now is the result of that backyard moment. Here's what I've learned in the months since. The doing of this thing, the writing, the scripting, the recording, the editing, the public risk of saying something I might be wrong about. It has produced something that money never produced, a specific internal kind of stillness. The promise kept to myself, made visible, and I considered that as inner joy. Surely the views make me happy, the comments make me happy, the fact that I can feel ideas moving through me again instead of pressing on the inside of my skull makes me really happy. The connection to pleasure physics is simple. Sattvic pleasures, both kinds, build inner joy. Every time you do the hard thing or you cross the inertia and do the whole thing, you're sending one message to your own nervous system. I'm someone who shows up. I'm someone I can count on. That's the foundation. Not the workout, not the walk. The promise kept to yourself. Rajasic and tamasic pleasure, outsource your joy to the next hit, the next reel, the next drink, the next shopping item in your cart, the next tab, the next person. And the moment the hit ends, the floor drops. Because nothing in you got built. Because the pleasure was external and rented. You're not consuming pleasure. You're constructing yourself with it. Alright, here's how you use this. Today, before any pleasure choice, especially in the small moments where you don't think you're choosing anything, run 3 questions. I call it the trajectory test. Question 1, am I building, numbing, or escaping? This one cuts the deepest, so I led with it. Building is sattvic. The pleasure is becoming a part of you. Numbing is tamasic. The pleasure is becoming a wall between you and your life. Escaping is rajasic. The pleasure is becoming the very thing you're trying to outrun. It takes 2 seconds to find the answer. The hard part is being honest with it. Question 2. What's the ripple if I do this 100 times? Pleasure choices look harmless individually. They never happen individually. They happen in patterns. So multiply. The scroll, run it 100 times. What do you have? The walk. Run it 100 times missed. What do you not have? That's how the horizontal ripple becomes visible from inside the moment. Question 3. Is the discomfort here actual pain or just inertia? This is the question that unlocks the 4th pleasure. Most of the things that feel like poison from the couch aren't poison. They're inertia. Getting out of bed is inertia. Putting on shoes is inertia. Driving to the trail is inertia. The walk in the forest itself is pure pleasure once you're there. Inertia gets misread as pain. So we skip the activity and we lose access to the entire 4th category, sattvic whole. If the answer is just inertia, you go anyway. The discomfort lasts 90 seconds. The pleasure lasts 90 minutes. The elixir lasts 90 days. And to be clear, this is not a vow of suffering. The Gita is not anti-pleasure. The sattvic whole category is huge, and most of us are barely tasting it. Real meals, real conversations, real movement, real rest, books, sleep, sun. Pleasure is not the enemy. Trajectory is the variable. Let me take you back to where we started. Brain rot is real. The most published reference language on earth gave it a name in 2024. Lembke, Bradman, Kotman. Different studies, different decades, same finding. The architecture of your mind is being shaped every hour by the trajectory of the pleasure you allow yourself. 3,000 years before any of them, Krishna gave Arjun the same map. The pain of discipline is finite. It hurts at the start, builds you in the middle, becomes the floor you live on at the end. The pain of indulgence is infinite. It feels good at the start, costs you in the middle, and there is no floor at the end. Only a slow drop with no one to catch you. You don't get to skip the pain, you only get to choose which one. You have 60 minutes after this video ends before something else takes them from you. And you have 4 kinds of pleasure to choose from. Pick the one that ends clean. Thank you for staying with me and watching. We'll catch you in the next one. Bye.